how should we think about these tools? So, my favorite quote ever, from Werner Vinci's book, Rainbow's End. So much for the big picture. Today, we are going to be talking about using large language models. As usual, we're looking to ask the right questions. Ms. Chumling said the secret of success was to learn to ask the right questions. But to do that, you had to know something about something. That wisdom, and everyone has some special talent, were the drumbeats of her classes. That's exactly what I was talking about, right? If you ask these tools the right questions, and if you know something about something, these tools can amplify your questions into larger outputs. But if you don't know anything, then it will produce the world's blandest, most generic essay that we fail not because it was produced by AI, but because it didn't answer the question. It's a bad essay, or it's factually incorrect. And so therefore, you must learn to ask the right questions. You must prompt it correctly. And you must have enough mental context to know something about something, such that you can exercise effective discernment when this thing is always confident and usually correct.
But that's really difficult as a user, isn't it?
Yeah.
What you're essentially saying in a lot of words, but anyway, is that, look, these things are really, really good in a particular space and really, really crummy
everywhere else.
Doing other things. And that we, the user, have to be really knowledgeable about where that frontier is so that we can then design it well. But the trouble is it's a moving frontier.
Mm-hmm.
The technology is advancing, different companies are doing different things, and the machine doesn't tell you in its output where it's reached the frontier, it just tells you an output. And so, although conceptually it makes good sense to say you need to really know what to ask it and how to ask it and what to do to get the result you want to utilize its strengths. The reality is that we as users, unless we're really up in the techies thing,
No.
get there.
This is not about the model. This is about the output. So when it gives you factual statements, that is the basis for your further research, not just trusting the factual statements, right? You don't have to know the differences between JIPIT 3.5 Turbo and 4. You don't have to know Claude, Claude Plus, Claude 100K. You have to look at the output, and you're exercising your judgment and discernment and critical capabilities on the output, not the mechanism.
But the quality and the nature of that output is evolving as the technology.
That doesn't matter, because you must only look at the output and treat it critically, not treat it as an authoritative source. So when it gives you something, you look at it and you go, well, what would it take for me to be able to believe this output? How does it resonate with my knowledge? Where do I need to do my own research based on Google Scholar to validate this output? You must not take the output of these tools as a source of factual truth, but it can do a great rap. Right? But that's the distinction, right? It can change the texture and the infological frame of the thing, but if it makes assertions of fact, you must never accept those assertions of fact unless you have reason to outside of the tool. Oh, here's a great one. If you ask this tool, are you sure? What will it respond? Yes. Because if you ask a human on the internet, are you sure? What will that human respond? Yes. Right? It does not operate on the facts, it operates on the most likely sequence of words. Which means if you ask it, was this text produced by a large language model? It will answer, but there's no basis for that answer. And so that's why this critical mode, where it's really useful at inflating that frame, but you have to go, okay, that's a statement of fact. So for example, when we're grading, best look for hallucitations, right? Look for these statements of fact that are trivial to test. Make sure that you're requiring page numbers so that it's really easy to open the citation, grab the page number, Control F, and then fail them. Not because they are using an AI, but because they have failed to exercise necessary discernment. They own their output. So here's a bunch of technologies, mostly names for you to reference later. Bing Chat, what we're having, or according to their terms of service, the Bing conversational experience. Never, ever referenced ever again. JPIT 4 has an 8,000 token window or a 32,000 token window if you can afford $1 million a year. You know, money bags. GPT 3.5 has 4 or recently 16,000 tokens. And then Claude Plus or Claude 100,000. So if you want to use the Great Gatsby as input, you can. It's really useful because the more you stuff into the context window, the more it has to predict the next word. And you can see me working around that scope in the editing example. What we're talking about here are heuristics, or rules of thumb. Bill Hammack talks about the engineering method. Rules of thumb are locally relevant heuristics, shortcuts to find a solution to the problem. Solving problems using rules of thumb, so engineering is solving problems using rules of thumb that cause the best change in a poorly understood situation using available resources. What we are doing in this first 226 days is figuring out the rules of thumb that work for us that cause these tools to respond the way that is useful to us. It is poorly understood. We have no idea what's going on. We have no science of large language models. We just have locally relevant heuristics that have produced useful outputs previously. Therefore, prompt engineering is aptly named since we have no idea what's going on, just like software engineering. Sorry. Right? What we're doing is we're figuring out ways of addressing the system that produces a useful output most of the time. We're building our grimoires. When people say prompt engineering, though, they usually mean the automation of prompts from some sort of computer system. And then we're computers talking to computers, and we're talking about making prompts that return a usefully consistent response. So for example, figuring out human dates is actually quite good at these systems are, because human dates are horrible, right? And so therefore, transforming a human date into something that a computer can understand is not actually the worst thing for a large language model. That's an automated transformation. That's not $1 million product, though. So, prompt engineering and consistent prompts following rules of thumb. So the trick is that when we're writing prompts in this style, they are consistent. So when we apply an input, we get a consistent output. You will engage in prompt engineering if you're using a large language model as part of your research across a large corpus of data, and you need it to respond predictably. So for example, sentiment analysis or topic extraction. You're going to want to spend quite a lot of time writing a very good prompt so that it responds effectively most of the time. This is prompt engineering. There's also transactional prompting, where you're just going, you're just talking, stuff will happen. But I've used it to clean data. I've used it to generate abstracts. All of these links, by the way, are in the PDF. Right? So I've given it a web page for like a game, a wiki from a game. I pasted in that wiki. And then it turned this text. So here, I gave it SQL. I gave it the input and the output. So I said, take this as an input, structure this as a specific sort of output, and then test it. And then it wrote code, and it read in the web page, and then transformed that web page into a database. Right? There's no surprise here. It is transforming the information into a different format.
Explain that a bit further, please, Brian, about the transforming.
Yes. So my prompt was a fairly long prompt. And again, ignore the meat of the prompt. This is an example, right? So I'm pasting from a games wiki saying this resource can be used to blah, 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 blah. And it's a web page table. So I copy it in. I literally copy, and that's why it's weirdly formatted. And I use the triple backtick to say, hey, this is a special zone. And then I write, so I, the human, wrote this output. So I say, you will take this input and make it look like this output. So for example, if you have an ARC report with a table, you copy the table in, and you say, please make this table look like this, and then you give it a new table. So here, I wrote a prompt that had the input and the output, and then I said, here, do a trial run. And then it read the web page and then wrote the output in the exact same way, right? So this method of prompting says, here is the transformation that I want. Here's the input marketing plus wrap. Now, here's some new information, make a wrap from it. So this is what I was talking about with you, right? Where if you want it to give a specific kind of output, give it the output first. So say, here's how I want you to transform the thing, and work through the entire mechanism, and then give it new data, and it will repeat the pattern. These things are really good at repeating patterns. And so if you give it a pattern, then following that pattern is the path of lowest perplexity, because it is more likely to repeat the pattern that you've given it. We are going to pick back up with an activity. And so this activity is asking a question of a PDF. So this is where having Microsoft Edge set up correctly will be important. And so we begin with the necessary setup. First, and hopefully everyone has done this already, you will need to be logged in to a personal account. It must say personal. You must be using Microsoft Edge. Then, what you'll want to do is click on the Settings menu, the three little meatballs in a line, and go to Settings. So you're going to want to click on the three dots on a line and go to Settings. In Settings, you're going to want to click on the hamburger menu, or you're going to want the sidebar. So that sidebar, and you're going to want to click on Sidebar. Yes, this is the sidebar. Then in the sidebar, where we are customizing the sidebar, this word is losing all meaning, you're going to want to find the B icon. Do note that it may or may not say Bing Chat, it might say Discover, because consistency is for people who aren't Microsoft. So you're going to want to click there. So this is, you go to Settings, Sidebar, Bing Chat, or Discover. Then once there, you're going to click Allow Access to any web page or PDF. This, by the way, is why it's so useful having this be in its own little profile, because this is not commonly something that we want. It's great that Microsoft makes us load a program we never use to do this. So you're going to want to turn on Allow Access to any web page or PDF. Then, this is in many ways the hardest part, you're going to need to find a paper. So you're going to want to search for this paper. It's on SSRN. Not M, RN. This is why I gave it to you in an email link. Because using search engines is difficult in this year. So now we're going to want to click on the B in the corner. the Bing Chat button. The B in the corner. Now, what you're looking for is purple. If it is not purple, click More Creative. Now, let me be clear. You can use any PDF you want, right? I'm just trying to encourage this paper because it's an interesting paper that just came out. Then, click this B in the corner, right? So you're going to click that B, and you're going to want to get the Bing Chat sidebar. This, by the way, is why we need to use Edge, and it's the only reason why we need to use Edge. You're going to want to click More Creative, because apparently what More Creative means is use the expensive mode and uses GPT-4. If you use More Balanced, it uses GPT 3.5. Whoa. So we are going to be starting with our prompt. And so I tend to start with the salutation because it is my heuristic. I find that it's better that way. I have no reason to believe that. I have no science to my art. It's just the way I have produced prompts that have worked for me. Hi, Bing. So then what you want is role. The reason you want to start with role is this changes the register and tone of its response. It has no bearing on the accuracy of the response, but the word choice of the response. It's still useful. Today you will act as my research assistant. Punctuation on the web, unheard of. But again, not using punctuation will change how it responds. We will be preparing a summary of a document. So general goal I find is quite useful because again, think about this as subtracting negative space. We are removing the marble that does not belong in the statue. We have very little control over what the statue actually is, but we can remove large portions of marble that don't belong. So we have role and we have goal. And then we have our first activity. Please load the local context. This phrase, local context, is what it calls the currently open tab. This is the term of art that I find that works about 70% of the time. Better than nothing. What is the local context? The currently open tab. Just that is it. Inside the chatbot, when we say local context, it runs a specific thing in Edge saying, hey, give me the web page. That's all we have, right? So what I'm doing is I am mirroring the terms that were here in previous versions of Bing. Basically, if I say otherwise, it will tend to search more often. So this way, it tends to search less often. Again, heuristics. These are rules of thumb that work for me. Then I always give a easy to fail check. What is the title of this document? You must give something that tells you as soon as possible that you've gone off the rails. Because if it can't return the text of the document, it can't tell you anything else. But the gravest danger is if you don't notice it. If it can extrapolate valid answers to your questions purely from your questions, that way lies danger. And that is why I always include a factual question that is trivial for me to check as part of this prompt. push return. Now, it's very important that you see searching your page for information. If you don't see that, raise your hand. You must see searching your page for information after you hit return. If you don't see that, raise your hand, because something's gone wrong. Yes. So if you see searching for local context, that means that it is looking for the word local context on Bing Chat, which means you have not set up your browser permissions correctly. If someone nearby could help, that'd be great. So this is why you have to go to Settings, Bing Chat, and Allow Access. You may need to restart your browser. But then I see navigating the jagged blah, 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 blah by this, right? This is now me validating that it loaded the text, which means that I can have a higher degree of confidence that when I ask it questions, this document is in the context window. So, is everyone here? Everyone got this?
The response is a bit different to what I get.
Yeah. Yes. Well, remember that probability graph, right? It is choosing a most likely word based on a range of probabilities. This, by the way, is the technical term temperature, or randomness of variation. More creative mode turns up the temperature. You will never get consistent output in the chatbot interface mode.
So if you ask it to summarize this article,
Yeah.
which I just had, is it likely that it will do a very good summary?
It will most likely do a service. So this is the Reagan Trust But Verify.
Yeah.
It's because this is a transformation task, therefore this is something that we can rely on.
Yeah.
It will do a fairly good job of summarization most of the time, but never treat claims of fact as true until you have verified them.
Even when we say, here's the article,
Yes.
summarize that,
Yeah.
do that.
But the thing is it's actually quite fast to do that double check rather than read a 60-page article.
Yes.
Right? So there are efficiencies here. This is not an entire waste of time, just like a 98% waste. Right? So because it is easy to validate claims of fact, it's still worthwhile. But you cannot trust the claims of fact without validation. I mean, look, obviously, if it doesn't matter to you, then you look at it, you go, it's believable, right? But if you're doing research on it, always validate. If you're an undergraduate, if we are assigning this sort of task to our undergraduates, the meat of the thing is the validation, because what this actually is spaced repetition, right? That by editing, we're going up in Bloom's taxonomy, we're causing them to critique rather than understand. And by causing them to validate, we're causing them to revisit the information, which means that this is actually pedagogically very sneaky.
And if this is a pretty poorly written, were this to be a pretty poorly written paper,
Yeah.
which didn't have a good conclusion or whatever, would the algorithm have more difficulty providing a good summary?
It depends on how surprising the paper is, right? Because, yeah, garbage in, garbage out.
But you're saying possibly poorly in and quality.
Yes, because if the information's there, then it can reformulate that information to be an authoritative, well-formulated wrap.
Yes.
But
They get it wrong.
it may get it wrong. Unfortunately, the input form of the information has very little to do whether or not it gets it wrong. All right, so I'm going to give you two examples. So for example, I can say, what's the jagged frontier? Right? So navigating the jagged technological frontier, you know, I could go to the effort of reading the abstract, but that's far too difficult. Also, because I've actually read this, I can check this. The Jagged Frontier, yep. And this is a really good summary of the Jagged Frontier. Also, do note the citations. Just because there is a citation does not mean that you should believe it. This is one of the things that I think that Bing Chat is really, really good at in terms of an interface. Loading a web page and then writing commands against that web page, that can be really powerful. Extract tables, reformulate tables, summarize sections, highlight blocks and do things to them. This pattern right here is a hint at a product.
Dumb question, how do we export the output?
Oh, I have bad news for you.
That way.
Select all, copy and paste. So unfortunately, the sidebar is a hint at a good product, not actually a good product, because here's the, you can share this, right? And you can do all these things. Oh, privacy. Isn't that cute? So technically, you can click export, and you can say, give it to me in a PDF. That's so pointless. It doesn't even export the conversation. And here's the problem. The moment you load a document, Bing says, oh, I'm in privacy mode. I will stop tracking this in the history. Do note that when it says that it's in privacy mode and it's not tracking in the history, that you should not rely on that for private information. There should be no expectation of privacy. In this case, it was able to load down here, load this part into the context window and give it to us. That's not bad. This works about 1 and 2 times that I've tried it. There's a but in terms of a judgment call, I would say that that's the last sentence in the document. Note that this isn't actually the last sentence in the conclusion, it's the appendices. And if you ask for the last sentence before the references, it gets it wrong, because this document isn't formatted well. But putting in give me the last sentence can give you hints as to what's in the context window. Hints. Unless it searches again and loads a different part into the context window.
I just have to point out, the summary is fabulous here. This paper finds that consultants who use AI are significantly more productive, but also that they produce more incorrect answers
Yes.
on the task.
Yeah. And so that is a rephrasing of the abstract. So it's a good abstract, which means that it's a good summary of the abstract. And also that's why I gave you this paper, because it's not a raw paper. It's N750 with pre-registered outcomes that is nuanced, and the concept of the jagged technological frontier is really good. And also came out like 3 days ago. So current research.